Today's update is one you need to hear from start to finish because for the first time in years, the clues around Iraq's monetary reform are lining up in a way that even new investors can clearly understand. Whether you've held Iraqi Dinar for a decade or you just started studying the revaluation conversation, you're about to get a breakdown that cuts through hype and focuses on what is actually happening behind the scenes right now in 2025. Many people in the community feel confused because there are so many opinions, predictions, rumors, and emotionally charged posts online. But when you strip away all the noise, when you look only at the hard indicators, the official statements, the economic environment, and the historical behavior of Iraq's central bank, a very clear picture begins to form. And that picture tells a story not of random surprises or overnight miracles, but of a structured, step by step currency reform that follows patterns seen in other nations that rebuilt their financial systems after years of instability. So stay with me as we walk through each part of that sequence, because everything you are about to hear is designed to help you understand what truly matters for the IQD, what is just noise, and why so many clues are finally lining up at the same time. Let's begin with the most important starting point, the confirmed exchange rates. As of today, the official Central Bank of Iraq rate remains at 1,310 dinar to 1 US dollar. Meanwhile, the market rate that was last publicly reported sits at 1,390 per dollar. At first glance, these numbers might look like simple data points, but they actually tell a much deeper story about where Iraq stands right now in its journey toward monetary reform. This spread between the official rate and the market rate shows Iraq is still outside the internationally required compliance window known as the 2% rule. This is not a guessing point. It is a standard used worldwide. A country must maintain a very tight spread between its official rate and its street rate for a consistent period, usually around 90 days. This ensures the currency is stable, the market is functioning properly, and the financial system is not being distorted by corruption or speculative manipulation. When Iraq falls outside this window, it tells us that more internal cleanup is needed before the currency can be recognized globally and before any revaluation or reinstatement can take place. This is why investors track the market rate so closely. It reveals the real-world conditions that determine Iraq's progress. Now, many new investors hear different voices online talking about how close Iraq is to a revaluation. Some say we are near the finish line. Others say there is more work to be done. So, let's clarify what these opinions are actually based on. Most of these estimates come from what analysts call the monetary reform checklist. This is not a literal document Iraq publishes in a single list, but rather a collection of requirements, benchmarks, and economic steps that must be completed for any nation wanting a stronger, internationally recognized currency. These steps include improving banking oversight, meeting international standards, building strong reserves, stabilizing the exchange rate, passing financial laws, improving government budgeting, modernizing payment systems, and ensuring compliance with global institutions. Some of these items are already completed, others are partially complete, and a few are still in progress. This creates a wide range of interpretations. When commentators say we are close, they usually mean most structural steps are done. When others argue more time is needed, they are referring to compliance gaps, political transitions, or unfinished laws. So the numbers you hear, like 26% believing an RV is close or 74% expecting more steps, are not scientific measurements. They are interpretations of progress. Understanding that difference helps remove confusion for new investors. Let's talk about one of the most important points that often gets misunderstood: the introduction of lower denominations. Many people assume that new, smaller notes must come first in order for a revaluation to happen. However, economic logic and Iraq's own central bank policies state the opposite. Currency reform does not begin with printing and distributing smaller notes while the currency still has low purchasing power. Smaller notes only make sense when the value of the currency increases first. A country introduces new denominations because citizens need them in everyday use, not because investors are expecting a specific outcome. The proper sequence is straightforward: raise the value, stabilize the purchasing power, educate the public on the upcoming changes, and then gradually release the new notes into circulation. This avoids confusion, prevents counterfeit risks, and ensures that businesses and citizens understand how the new system works. This is why economic experts repeatedly explain that raising value is the first step in the process, not the final step. And when you understand this sequence, you begin to see how Iraq has been moving intentionally through each stage of the reform instead of rushing prematurely or making sudden decisions that could disrupt the economy. To truly understand where Iraq might be heading, it helps to look at the history of how countries restructure their currencies after long periods of instability. Globally, the pattern is remarkably consistent. Anytime a nation rebuilds after economic conflict, political transition, or structural corruption, the central bank follows a phased reform program. The first phase usually involves stabilizing inflation, increasing foreign currency reserves, and cleaning up financial institutions. The second phase focuses on restoring confidence through regulatory reforms, international partnerships, and banking modernization. The third phase involves adjusting the currency's value, updating the financial infrastructure, and preparing for global re-entry through systems like forex. Iraq has followed this pattern almost exactly for the past several years. They strengthened reserves, improved payment systems, upgraded banks, introduced digital platforms, and connected their finances with multiple international frameworks. While challenges remain, especially with corruption and political tug-of-war, the overall direction is clear. What's important is that these steps are not random. They are part of a long-term, structured plan designed to put Iraq in a position to stand on equal footing with other global economies. Recognizing this pattern helps investors understand the bigger picture instead of getting distracted by daily rumors or sudden predictions. One of the most important elements of any currency reform is compliance with international standards. This is where the 2% rule, banking regulations, and IMF guidelines become crucial. Many new investors mistakenly believe these standards are optional or flexible. They are not. They exist to protect global markets, prevent manipulation, and ensure stability. When a country fails to meet these standards, international institutions restrict access to certain financial systems until corrections are made. Iraq has gone in and out of compliance several times in recent years, primarily due to currency leakage, unofficial exchange markets, and political interference. However, each time they fall out of compliance, the central bank responds with measures designed to pull them back in. This includes tightening oversight of currency auctions, reducing dependence on the dollar, promoting electronic payments, and increasing transparency among private banks. These steps may seem slow or repetitive, but they are necessary. A country cannot revalue or reinstate its currency internationally if it is failing at the most fundamental standard of stability, a narrow spread between the official rate and the market rate. This is why the market rate matters so much. It reveals whether reforms are truly taking effect or whether deeper issues still need addressing. Let's move into one of the most debated topics among investors: the timeline for a possible revaluation or reinstatement. Many commentators argue that any major change to Iraq's currency is typically done at the beginning of a fiscal year. There is strong logic behind this argument. Starting a new rate at the beginning of a fiscal year allows the government to create a cleaner, more consistent budget. It also prevents accounting confusion, avoids mid-year disruptions, and gives businesses time to adjust their financial planning. While no one can claim an exact date, historically, many countries that restructured their currencies after financial instability did so between late December and early February. This window makes it easier for governments to implement changes, calculate revenue forecasts, and update financial records. Iraq has already shown interest in synchronizing parts of its economic planning with the start of fiscal cycles. While this does not guarantee anything, it is a pattern worth observing. For new investors, the key takeaway is that currency reform is rarely a random event. It usually aligns with financial calendars, institutional requirements, and economic cycles because that is how stable reform is executed. Another factor that strengthens the full picture is the increasing activity happening behind the scenes in Iraq's banking sector. Over the past year, the country has expanded its gold reserves, enhanced financial partnerships with regional neighbors, and introduced modern systems to support electronic payments and international transfers. Iraq has also pushed for a more transparent banking environment, requiring private banks to meet higher global standards. These improvements may sound technical, but they play a major role in determining when the country becomes ready for a stronger currency. Nations cannot raise the value of their currency without the foundation to support it. Strong reserves protect the currency, electronic systems prevent fraud and corruption, international partnerships allow the currency to flow more easily across borders, transparency builds trust with global institutions. When you combine these steps with Iraq's ongoing budget improvements and its focus on economic growth, you begin to see why analysts believe the foundation for revaluation is being built deliberately. It is not about sudden announcements, it is about strengthening the entire financial system until it is stable enough to carry a new rate confidently and without external pressure. An important point for new investors is understanding the difference between political events and economic events. Politics can speed up or slow down progress, but the currency's value is ultimately determined by financial stability, compliance, and international readiness. Some investors mistakenly believe that political disagreements or leadership changes directly determine when the IQD revalues, but monetary policy operates independently from political cycles. Central banks around the world are designed to function outside political influence because currency stability must remain consistent even when governments change. Iraq has experienced political gridlock, cabinet reshuffles, and economic tug-of-war, but the Central Bank of Iraq has continued implementing reforms regardless of these challenges. This is another clue in the larger picture. When a central bank continues to modernize systems, upgrade banking infrastructure, and enforce international standards despite political noise, it signals determination to reach long-term goals. Understanding this separation helps investors avoid emotional reactions to political headlines. Instead of worrying about every disagreement or protest, investors should focus on the financial indicators that actually influence currency value. And right now, those indicators show gradual but consistent improvement. One major misconception that often spreads throughout the community is the belief that the revaluation will happen suddenly without any visible progress beforehand. But monetary policy does not function like a surprise lottery. Countries do not wake up one day and decide to raise their currency without having completed the technical, legal, and financial groundwork. Before any revaluation occurs, there are always telltale signs. Exchange rate stability tightens, market spreads shrink, banking systems become fully digital, government budgets begin aligning with future financial strategies, educational materials and public communication increase. New notes are quietly printed and stored in preparation, though not released until the appropriate time. These steps can take months or even years, depending on how complicated the reform is. Iraq has already completed several of these foundational steps, and the remaining steps are becoming more visible as the country continues adjusting its banking operations. This structured approach is why so many observers believe the timeline is narrowing. The clues are showing movement, not instant movement, but steady and intentional progress that mirrors revaluation patterns seen in other nations. For investors, recognizing this sequence removes confusion and keeps expectations grounded in real-world behavior rather than rumors. Let's also address another widespread myth: the idea that foreign governments, especially powerful nations, directly control Iraq's revaluation. This belief has circulated for many years, but it is not how international finance works. No country has the authority to dictate the exchange rate of another sovereign nation. What foreign governments influence are compliance standards, sanctions, trade relationships, and access to certain financial networks. They cannot force Iraq to change its currency value. What they can do is restrict or permit economic tools that Iraq needs to participate in global markets. This means the true control rests with Iraq's own central bank, its economic policies, and its internal stability. Understanding this distinction helps investors avoid blaming outside forces when progress appears slow. The pace of reform is determined by Iraq's ability to meet global standards, implement financial laws, reduce corruption, and modernize its banking sector. These are domestic challenges, not international roadblocks. When Iraq strengthens these internal mechanisms, external restrictions naturally ease, and the path toward a stronger currency becomes more open. This internal focus is where the real progress is happening today. Another key piece of the puzzle is Iraq's reserve strength. Reserves are the backbone of any currency reform. They protect a nation against volatility, support its exchange rate, and provide confidence to international markets. Iraq has significantly increased its foreign currency reserves and continues to accumulate gold, which is one of the safest and most stable assets a country can hold. Strong reserves are essential for any country considering a revaluation because they ensure that the central bank can support the new rate and defend it against speculative attacks. Iraq's increasing reserves signal that the country is consciously preparing for future steps, not acting impulsively or without strategy. Additionally, Iraq has maintained low inflation, which is another critical requirement for a successful currency reform. A country cannot strengthen its currency if inflation is spiraling out of control. Low inflation means that the currency's purchasing power is stable enough to support a higher rate. Combining strong reserves with low inflation paints a positive picture for Iraq's economic future. It shows readiness, discipline, and a commitment to long-term prosperity, all of which are essential elements for a successful revaluation. Now, let's talk about the role of laws and economic reforms. Many people underestimate how important legal frameworks are in shaping currency value. Iraq has introduced and refined several economic laws over the past few years, including financial management laws, investment laws, banking reforms, and regulatory frameworks that align the nation with global standards. However, passing laws is only one part of the equation. The real challenge is implementing them effectively. Implementation requires enforcement, compliance, monitoring, transparency, and cooperation between government agencies. Iraq has made noticeable progress in these areas, but more work is still needed, especially in combating corruption and strengthening the rule of law. Without proper implementation, even the best written laws cannot support a stable financial system. But with proper implementation, these laws become powerful tools that attract foreign investment, encourage domestic growth, stabilize the economy, and strengthen the currency. Investors should pay close attention to how Iraq continues applying these reforms. Each step forward is another clue, indicating readiness for a future where the Iraqi dinar can function confidently beyond its borders. As we move deeper into this discussion, it's important to remember that economic reform does not happen in isolation. Iraq's currency reform is closely tied to its broader economic strategy, which includes expanding oil production, diversifying revenue sources, improving trade agreements, and supporting private sector growth. While oil remains Iraq's largest revenue source, the country has been making efforts to reduce its dependence on oil alone. By strengthening non-oil sectors, Iraq can create a more balanced and resilient economy, which in turn supports a stronger national currency. Diversification also attracts foreign investment, increases job opportunities, and stabilizes government budgets. These broader economic improvements create an environment where a revaluation becomes more sustainable. A currency cannot remain strong unless the economy supporting it is also strong. And this is exactly why analysts study not only banking reforms but also economic development indicators. When both financial reforms and economic reforms move in the right direction at the same time, it signals a deeper transformation. Iraq is showing signs of building a stronger foundation for its long-term financial future. One of the clearest signs of progress comes from the modernization of Iraq's banking systems. Over the past few years, Iraq has been transitioning from a cash-heavy society into a digital financial environment. The introduction of electronic payment systems, international banking platforms, and improved digital governance has made it easier for citizens and businesses to manage money securely. This shift is important because a modern banking system reduces fraud, increases transparency, and strengthens government oversight. It also aligns Iraq with global standards, allowing smoother international transactions and reducing reliance on the US dollar. These improvements may seem technical, but they have a major impact on currency value. A strong digital infrastructure gives the central bank more control, improves financial stability, and prepares the country for integration into international markets. When you look at other countries that successfully restructured their currencies, digital modernization was always a key component. Iraq is following this same pattern, and it indicates that the country is preparing the necessary foundation for a stronger and more recognized currency in the future. Another interesting clue in Iraq's reform journey is the focus on reducing dollar dependency. For many years, Iraq relied heavily on the US dollar for trade, daily transactions, and international payments. This reliance created challenges because it made Iraq vulnerable to external pressure and limited its monetary independence. Over the past year, Iraq has taken several steps to reduce this dependency. These steps include encouraging local currency use in domestic transactions, strengthening relations with neighboring countries to support dinar-based trade, and expanding the country's ability to use alternative currencies in international deals. Reducing dependency on the dollar is not about rejecting the dollar, it's about giving Iraq more control over its own currency. When a country depends too heavily on another nation's currency, it becomes difficult to stabilize its own exchange rate. By reducing dollar reliance, Iraq is laying the foundation for a more independent and stable dinar. This shift is a strong signal that the central bank is preparing for future steps that require stronger monetary control. Let's talk about the importance of public education in the currency reform process. Before any major change, whether it involves new denominations, increased value, or updated policies, governments typically launch information campaigns to prepare the public. These campaigns include official statements, interviews, educational materials, and explanations of how the new system will work. Iraq has already published multiple statements over the years explaining parts of its monetary reform strategy. These public communications are not random. They are part of a long-term effort to inform citizens, build trust, and ensure that changes are understood. When a revaluation or currency reform happens without proper education, confusion spreads, and the economy can be disrupted. But when a government takes time to educate its people, the process becomes smoother and more successful. The fact that Iraq continues to release official explanations about purchasing power, exchange rate stability, and future steps indicates that the groundwork for reform is being laid carefully. Education is always one of the final steps before a major policy shift, and Iraq's increasing communication is a key clue that progress is actively being shaped. A crucial part of the revaluation conversation involves the concept of purchasing power. Raising the value of a currency is not just about improving international exchange rates, it also means increasing how much the currency can buy inside the country. When a nation strengthens its purchasing power, citizens can buy more with the same amount of money, prices stabilize, the economy grows, confidence increases. Iraq has repeatedly stated that it intends to improve purchasing power through its monetary reform strategies. This is an important signal because it shows that the reform is not only focused on international markets but also on the everyday lives of Iraqi citizens. A stronger currency helps businesses, families, and the government. It reduces inflationary pressures and improves economic stability. This focus on purchasing power aligns with global trends seen in other countries that restructured their currencies successfully. It means that Iraq is not simply chasing an international rate, it is working to build a stable and prosperous domestic economy that can support that stronger rate when the time arrives. This balanced approach is a major indicator of long-term success. Another major clue that investors should pay attention to is the structured pace at which Iraq is implementing its reforms. Some countries rush currency changes and struggle with instability afterward. Iraq, on the other hand, is taking a slow, methodical approach. This has frustrated some investors who hoped for instant results, but it is actually a sign of seriousness. Slow reform reduces risks. It prevents financial shocks. It gives the central bank time to evaluate each step and adjust policies as needed. A sudden, unplanned revaluation could damage the economy, confuse citizens, or lead to rapid speculation. But a structured, deliberate reform process creates stability and ensures that once the currency strengthens, it stays strong. When you analyze Iraq's step-by-step progress, reserves, compliance, banking, modernization, public education, digital systems, reduced dollar dependency, you see a consistent rhythm. This rhythm is not accidental. It is the rhythm of a country preparing for a major transformation. The clues are not isolated, they are connected, and together, they form a clear picture of where Iraq is heading. One of the best ways to understand Iraq's progress is to compare it with countries that have gone through similar transformations. Nations such as Kuwait, South Korea, Germany, and others experienced currency instability before rebuilding into more modern and powerful economies. In nearly every case, the process followed predictable stages: stabilize, modernize, strengthen, then revalue or reinstate. Iraq is walking through the same stages today. Economic rebuilding is not a straight line, and there are always delays, setbacks, and unexpected challenges. But the overall trend is what matters. Iraq's financial trajectory today looks significantly stronger than it did 5 or 10 years ago. The banking sector is more advanced, the reserves are higher, inflation is lower, digital platforms are improving, international relationships are expanding, and the nation's long-term financial strategy is aligning with global standards. These are the exact ingredients that other countries had in place before their currencies entered new phases. Understanding this historical context helps investors see that Iraq is not an exception. It is following a known economic path that often leads to stronger currency outcomes. Now, let's bring all the clues together into one clear picture. We have the official rate at 1,310, the market rate at 1,390, and a gap that still needs to close for compliance. We have a central bank modernizing systems, accumulating reserves, digitizing payments, and pushing for higher transparency. We have a government refining its budget, implementing laws, and working toward long-term economic stability. We have a growing focus on purchasing power, reduced dependency on foreign currencies, and improved international partnerships. We have ongoing public education, communication from financial leaders, and structural economic advancements. When you look at these pieces individually, they might seem small, but when you place them together, they create a roadmap, one that shows Iraq is moving steadily toward a financial environment capable of supporting a stronger currency. It's not about guessing dates or waiting for surprise announcements. It's about observing the measurable progress happening month by month. Investors who focus on the indicators, not the noise, are able to see the transformation clearly, and the indicators show movement in the right direction. As we wrap up today's deep dive, remember this: the Iraqi Dinar revaluation is not a rumor-based event, not a mystery, not a sudden miracle. It is a structured, predictable financial process that follows the same steps other countries have followed during major monetary reform. The clues are not hidden, they are visible to anyone watching. The key indicators: exchange rate stability, compliance with international standards, strong reserves, modern banking, digital systems, improved laws, reduced corruption, enhanced transparency, and gradual public preparation. These are the exact ingredients required for a successful currency transition. Right now, Iraq is aligning these ingredients one by one. The process is not finished yet, but the direction is unmistakable. For new investors, the most important thing you can do is stay informed, stay realistic, and stay focused on what truly matters. Ignore the noise, watch the indicators, understand the strategy, and recognize that every step Iraq takes today is part of a larger plan to rebuild its financial future. The clues are lining up, the timeline is becoming clearer, and the foundation for a stronger Iraqi dinar is being shaped right now. Stay tuned, stay patient, and stay grounded because this story is still unfolding.